Barbados is charting a new course where mental health is a priority and every person has the right to access care without stigma or discrimination.
Anyone can face mental health challenges at some point in their lives. Fortunately, Barbados has made remarkable strides in transforming mental health services.
With legislation and policy updates, mental health care is more accessible, inclusive, and community-centered.
Persons can access all healthcare services, including mental health, at all our polyclinics.
With updated policies, expanded services, and empowered communities, Barbados is proving that mental health truly matters. Together, we're creating a future where everyone can thrive.
Mental health management must also be considered when caring for expectant mothers. At our polyclinics, we're integrating mental health into maternal and child health services by training our nurses to use the Mental Health Gap Action Program Intervention Guide. It helps to build their capacity to identify and address mental health problems in parents in the perinatal period. We hope to positively impact the mental health of parents, their children, and by extension, our nation.
For years, I struggled in silence, unsure where to turn. But with the services available at my local polyclinic and the support of family and friends, I feel seen, heard, and empowered to live my best life.
Children and adolescents can also be affected by mental health conditions, and they should feel assured that mental health services are available.
Introducing mental health literacy programs in our schools is very important. We need to know it's okay to talk about our feelings. This will help us to learn how to support each other and to seek help when we need it.
Mental health is a cornerstone of our health agenda. By integrating mental health services into primary care and concomitantly expanding community level resources, we are breaking barriers and ensuring that no one is left behind, because good mental health is a right for everyone, everywhere.
PAHO WHO is committed to support Barbados in this transformation. They are building a model of care that prioritizes accessibility, respects human rights, and tackles a stigma head-on in a world where mental health needs are increasing and responses are insufficient. Only last year, member states of PAHO approved a resolution on mental health. Barbados is a good example of accelerated action to advance the mental health agenda. We commend Barbados for its foresight in prioritizing mental health.
Barbados is charting a new course where mental health is a priority and every person has the right to access care without stigma or discrimination.
Anyone can face mental health challenges at some point in their lives. Fortunately, Barbados has made remarkable strides in transforming mental health services.
With legislation and policy updates, mental health care is more accessible, inclusive, and community-centered.
Persons can access all healthcare services, including mental health, at all our polyclinics.
For years, I struggled in silence, unsure where to turn. But with the services available at my local polyclinic and the support of family and friends, I feel seen, heard, and empowered to live my best life.
Mental health management must also be considered when caring for expectant mothers. At our polyclinics, we're integrating mental health into maternal and child health services by training our nurses to use the Mental Health Gap Action Program Intervention Guide. It helps to build their capacity to identify and address mental health problems in parents in the perinatal period. We hope to positively impact the mental health of parents, their children, and by extension, our nation.
Children and adolescents can also be affected by mental health conditions, and they should feel assured that mental health services are available.
Introducing mental health literacy programs in our schools is very important. We need to know it's okay to talk about our feelings. This will help us to learn how to support each other and to seek help when we need it.
Establishing the mental health hotline, Lifeline Barbados, has been a game changer. With trained operators and clear protocols, we're providing a lifeline to those in crisis, ensuring that they know help is just a call away.
Mental health is a cornerstone of our health agenda. By integrating mental health services into primary care and concomitantly expanding community-level resources, we are breaking barriers and ensuring that no one is left behind, because good mental health is a right for everyone, everywhere.
PAHO WHO is committed to support Barbados in this transformation. They are building a model of care that prioritizes accessibility, respects human rights, and tackles a stigma head-on in a world where mental health needs are increasing and responses are insufficient. Only last year, member states of PAHO approved a resolution on mental health. Barbados is a good example of accelerated action to advance the mental health agenda. We commend Barbados for its foresight in prioritizing mental health.
With updated policies, expanded services, and empowered communities, Barbados is proving that mental health truly matters. Together, we're creating a future where everyone can thrive.
seated. My name is Dale Ford, and I'm your MC for this evening's Mind Your Mind 2, a community mental health conversation here at the Princess Margaret Secondary School. At this time, I would like to invite Kaylee Olton to give her presentation of my mental health journey.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Kaylee. Speaking here tonight is more than just a moment. It is monumental for me. Because truthfully, I never thought I would have made it to 30. But I did 2 days ago. And now, for the very first time in my life, I'm standing here, sharing my mental health story out loud. It's surreal, it's humbling, it's healing, and a bit scary. In my story, I hope that others feel seen, heard, and understood. That those struggling silently might find language for what they've been feeling. And that everyone listening tonight with open hearts will remember every story matters. Primary school is where it all started. I was chased down just to be beaten up, picked apart piece by piece, physically, emotionally, verbally, mentally. Called names, isolated, made to feel like I didn't belong. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I was different. I didn't wear the trendiest clothes, didn't roll with the popular crowd. I had learning challenges no one quite understood. I saw and processed the world differently, and the system didn't know what to do with that. Back then, no one was talking about ADHD. No one was talking about sensory processing difficulties. No one was talking about autism or being neurodivergent. So instead of support, I got targeted. Not once, not twice, relentlessly. This wasn't just teasing. It was pain that carved itself into my nervous system. Because that's what bullying does. It wires fear into your body. It makes your brain scan the room for danger, even when you're just sitting still. So I became hyper-aware, always on edge, always bracing because my body didn't feel safe anywhere. And then I'd go home where it was quiet, but I was still hurting. My parents were going through a divorce. The house didn't feel the same anymore. The dynamic shifted, and I was expected to be strong. I was the eldest, the helper, the one who had to hold it all together. And that's the thing in so many low and middle income households, especially in single-parent homes. Everyone's doing their best to survive, but that survival pressure, it trickles down. And children, especially the oldest, end up carrying things no child should. You learn quickly that your emotions come second, that your job is to be okay when you're not. You become the peacekeeper, the caregiver, the one who doesn't get to fall apart. And it wasn't just that one big moment that broke me, it was all the little ones. Eventually, I started to believe maybe I'm too much, maybe I don't belong anywhere, maybe my voice doesn't matter. That's what trauma teaches a child. Your truth is inconvenience, your pain is a burden, your voice is not welcome here, and that's where the damage begins. Trauma isn't just what happened to you. It's anything that shattered your sense of safety, identity, or worth, and made you feel like you had to survive in silence. And that's when the symptoms started to show. The overthinking, the self-blame, the constant people-pleasing, the feeling of being too much or never enough all at once, and that deep aching loneliness. By secondary school, the weight grew heavier. I carried unprocessed fear and the belief there's something wrong with me. School was harder, my brain felt foggy, and I suffered frequent migraines. My brain was overwhelmed. It was like every time I sat down to study or focus in class, I could feel my brain rejecting it. It was trying to block the information out. Almost it was telling me, nah, there's too much. You ever watch cartoons where a character's head starts swelling up or steaming or shaking because their brain's doing too much? Yeah, that was what was happening. I literally felt like my brain was like a computer with too many tabs open. One tab after another: school stress, home, unprocessed emotions, fear, pressure. And just like a computer, one too many tabs were open, it started to slow down, glitch, freeze, shut down. That was my brain. Art and volleyball were my lifelines. They gave me small moments of freedom when I was otherwise trapped in my head. Still, even though safe spaces, I was suffering silently. There were things happening around me and to me that I didn't have the words for. I started to self-harm because the emotional pain was so much. I just couldn't take it internally anymore. I guess it was like a punishment to myself. I started to self-harm so I could feel the physical pain instead, because the emotional pain was just an overload to my system. Nobody was talking about mental health. There was no conversations around it. Nobody was saying how they truly felt. I had friends, yes, but even though some of them started treating me differently, there was this quiet tension that started to build. You're different from us. Even through the laughing and the jokes, there were subtle shifts that created cracks. So I stayed quiet, kept it all in, and the cycle continued from thriving in childhood to surviving in chaos, to struggling in silence, to slipping into a full-on crisis, saying nothing, internalizing everything. And that silence, it became a cycle, a loop. The guilt, the shame, the fear, loneliness, frustration, self-blame, sadness, anger, all of it just constantly swirling. And that's the cycle, that's the emotional spiral so many of us live in for years. It eats away at your confidence, it drains your energy, it pushes you further into isolation. That's how unprocessed childhood experiences turn into trauma, and how ongoing trauma becomes mental illness. Because physical health challenges also added to my struggle, trying to fight through both mental and physical pain, all while still trying to show up with a smile, but drowning on the inside. Adulthood came fast, and time moved even faster. I measured my worth by how much I could give, how much I could do, but quietly I was breaking. Work life became overwhelming. I was doing everything I could to cope, even if it meant hurting myself in the process. Again, overthinking, the self-doubt, the isolation. The self-harm that started in secondary school shifted from a way to numb my emotional pain to figure out how to end it all. The planning began. The attempts got closer together. I was stuck in a cycle of self-destruction, feeling useless, feeling invisible, feeling alone. I kept asking myself, am I too much? Am I enough? Am I not enough? And the hardest part, trying to reach out, but being met with labels. If I spoke up, too sensitive. If I quit, you're antisocial. But the truth is, I wasn't really there. I was disassociating, physically present, but mentally gone. Culturally, we're expected to always be vibes and smiling, loud, social. Mental health struggles, misunderstood, mocked. Vulnerability meant judgment. It meant being seen as weak. So I stayed quiet, isolated myself more, and hid the pain deeper. Things got worse when my work schedule clashed with my healing. Therapy was on Thursdays, but I worked Thursdays. I wanted help, but I also needed the paycheck, so I kept putting it off. Medication was too expensive, too draining. It made me feel zombified, lethargic, foggy, zoned out. But it also triggered my history with bulimia and anorexia. For years, my weight fluctuated, my eating patterns spiraled. Eventually, I stopped treatment completely and kept spiraling like Alice in Wonderland, falling deeper into the rabbit hole. Years of unprocessed pain from childhood, bullying, and surviving all collided until one day I woke up in the hospital bed. I had ignored the warning signs for so long. My family found me. My family found me one day, and that day, it didn't end the way I planned. I wasn't relieved, I wasn't grateful, I was angry that it didn't work. And on top of that, I lived with this fear of disclosing my mental health history at work, afraid of the stigma, afraid of being reduced to a liability or labeled. That fear kept me quiet. I didn't want to be misunderstood or minimized. I used the time during COVID to start healing. It wasn't pretty, and it definitely wasn't linear, but it gave me the space to reconnect with the parts of myself I had long buried. I didn't want to just survive anymore. I wanted to live with intention, to create something meaningful, something that reflected the growth I was fighting for. That's when I finally felt motivated to become the entrepreneur I had always dreamed of. So I started Kazaria Auras, a self-care line of handcrafted soy wax candles and skincare products infused with essential oils named after affirmations. Each item was created not just to soothe the body, but to nurture the mind and spirit. It was my way of redefining self-care and supporting mental health, especially for those silently struggling. I knew what it felt like to not take care of myself, to feel disconnected, lost, unworthy. I wanted others to have in a way to feel like someone understood and someone cared. Then I became pregnant, and becoming a mother gave me an even deeper reason, a stronger way. Healing gave me a clarity. Motherhood gave me courage. And that's when I launched my second business, Little Cubs. So Kazarias was a whole space for adults, where Little Cubs is how I show up for children, starting with my son. I didn't want him to grow up carrying the same emotional burdens I did. I wanted to break the cycle. So Little Cubs is rooted in everything I needed growing up. It's not just about childcare, it's about nurturing the whole child, their mind, emotions, spirit, and a sense of self. But all of this, the healing, the purpose, the advocacy, wasn't something I walked alone. A big part of my journey has been Let's Unpack It, a mental health organization that became one of the most transformative spaces in my life. LUI gave me a space to speak, to feel seen, to give me a community. It reminded me that healing isn't just personal, it's collective. Through LUI, I've been part of deep, necessary conversations about trauma, identity, vulnerability, and mental health. And I've seen the power of holding spaces for others while doing their own work. That drive led me to join your report as well, where I advocate for youth voices and child rights, and I also completed a cohort with CISL, the Caribbean Institute of Social and Emotional Learning, deepening my understanding of emotional development, resilience, and conscious parenting. I didn't just want to run businesses, I wanted to advocate, to educate, to disrupt generational trauma, to help others heal, grow, and thrive. So, your voice matters. The last Mental Health Act in Barbados was passed in 1985. Nearly 40 years ago. So much has changed, and now we finally have a chance to help shape a better future. So, the government is inviting the public's feedback on the new draft mental health legislation. This is our opportunity to advocate for safer, more compassionate systems for ourselves, for our children, and generations to come. Whether you are struggling silently, supported someone through their battles, or believe in building a society where healing is possible, now this is the time to speak up. Let's make mental health a priority. Let's make it safe, and let's make it matter, because every voice matters.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. The Honorable Davison Ishmael, Minister of State in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Arthur Phillips, Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Taroline Malcolm, Acting PAHO WHO Representative, Dr. Maisha Emmanuel, Chairman of the National Mental Health Commission, other members of the National Mental Health Commission, senior officers of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, other specially invited guests, members of the media, and of course those who are joining us on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of this conversation. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Joy Su, who's the Deputy Chairman of the National Mental Health Commission, to give her presentation, which is a PowerPoint presentation on the draft mental health legislative notes.
Good evening, everyone. Protocols being already established, I just want to welcome everyone to this second community conversation about this very important topic. And seeing that this is a second community conversation and the chairman, Dr. Maisha Emmanuel, already did a presentation, today, instead of doing the comprehensive overview that she did, I'm going to do the broad strokes to give you an idea of what we were trying to achieve by these legislative notes and how we would like to improve the Mental Health Act from what it was 40-odd years ago. So I'd just like to start again by giving a brief overview of the mental health services that exist at present. So there's a psychiatric hospital, which you know is a large 500-bed facility, which has outpatient clinics from Monday to Friday. It has some specialist clinics like the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Clinic. It has specialist services like psychological services, forensic services, drug rehabilitation, occupational therapy, and it has a ward for children and adolescents, which is the Tri-Family Center. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital has a 12-bed unit, which is a psychiatric unit. It offers 2 outpatient clinics per week, and it does a range of consultation liaison services, offers those to other wards in the hospital. We have 9 polyclinics and 2 satellite clinics, which offer, in most cases, weekly mental health clinics. We have a large number of civil society organizations, which include things like NGOs and faith-based organizations, which offer a range of services, and this might include treatment, information, or advocacy, as you're seeing here tonight with the Let's Unpack It group. And then we have a number of private mental health practitioners, whether psychologists, psychiatrists, occupational therapists, and so on. So the thing about this is when we look at these services and we look at the old Act, we realize that the old Act is not fit for purpose because the old Act basically concentrated on hospital-based care and not community-based care. And that very much is where the world is moving in terms of modernizing mental health care. And so we need an act that represents that. But also, Barbados signed on to the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities since 2007, I believe. We've ratified that. And so we need an act that also reflected that. And so our whole act was built around the rights-based approach to mental health and to persons with disabilities. And so we'll talk a bit about that first. So, as I said, the old Act had no explicit statements about human rights provisions. And what we want to do with this new Act is to acknowledge the basic human rights that all persons have, but also persons with mental illness. I think that sometimes people think that persons with mental illness don't have the right to have certain things, and that is not true. They have the same rights as us. What we're doing here is not revolutionizing anything. We're just acknowledging that they have the same rights as you or anybody else who doesn't have mental illness. So I don't understand why it is that this makes some people uncomfortable. It should not. So if you go to your doctor, for instance, and you are a diabetic, and you don't like, say, metformin that you're on because it's causing nausea and so on, you can tell the doctor, I don't like that medication, it's making me feel sick, and you have the right to discontinue that medication. I'm an advocate for having a discussion with clients and coming to some kind of compromise between the two of you, but that should be a discussion that occurs. You shouldn't say you just have to take this medication because the doctor say so. And that's what people think that mental health services are about. And we don't want to be pushing something down someone where they don't give consent, especially if they're capable of giving consent. So you have the right to discontinuation of medication. You have the right to give or withhold consent. You have the right to confidentiality, to non-discrimination, you have the right to have parity of mental and physical health care. And that one is also very important because a lot of times mental health goes on the back burner. A lot of persons don't put mental health on the same standing as physical health problems, and that's something that we also need to change going forward. So we have to have integration, more integration of our services, and the approach to mental health has to be a multi-sectoral approach. So we have to integrate it into other areas, not just the Ministry of Health. So I wanted for balance to include the rights of providers. So it's not just clients that have rights, but the persons who provide services also have rights. And this one also is something that is controversial because people think because you work in healthcare generally, so it's not just mental health, in healthcare generally, that it means that it's part and parcel of your job that you can be assaulted. You should expect that. That's part of your job. No, it is not. Persons who provide healthcare services have the right to have a safe working environment. They have the right to ongoing training, and they have the right to have a supportive working environment. They have the right to have their contributions recognized, and they have the right to access mechanisms of complaint and redress. And I would like to add here that with great power comes great responsibility. Everybody should know that line. So you have rights, but persons also have responsibilities. So one of the other things we were looking at is making provisions for supported decision-making instead of what we had before, which was substituted decision-making. So basically, we were making the decisions for persons. So we've put these provisions into the new, what would go into the new act that are for supported decision-making. They include things like the advance directive. A person has, any person, so any person in the population, if you or I want to make this advance directive after this act's passed, even if you don't have a mental illness, you can make an advance directive that states, if at some point you lose your decision-making capacity and you develop a mental illness, or you want to outline your healthcare decisions in advance. So you say how you want to be treated or how you don't want to be treated, which healthcare facility you would prefer to be treated in. So those are some of the things that you can put in an advance directive, which outlines, as I said, your wishes and your preferences for your treatment if at some point you can't make those decisions yourself. And part of the advance directive is also choosing a nominated representative. Now, the nominated representative can be anyone. What we have now is the next of kin is automatically the person that makes the decision for you. But what I've seen sometimes is a person is admitted to hospital and their next of kin is still their wife, but they've been separated from their wife or their husband, depending on who it is, for years. This person doesn't know what is going on with them. It doesn't know what that person's preferences are. And maybe those persons are not, they're separated for a reason, meaning they don't have a good relationship. But then that's the person that may turn up and then decide to make decisions for the person. And I don't think that is correct. So what we try to do is give you the chance to choose a nominated representative. That could be anyone. It could be a family member, it could be just a friend, it could be a person that you trust. So it doesn't have to be a family member in this case, and you don't have to rely on your next of kin. If you haven't chosen a nominated representative in advance, then it might default to your next of kin. So we also put in provisions for enduring power of attorney, and this one's a little bit different. So with an enduring power of attorney, you have the right to choose someone who will make financial, healthcare, and property decisions for you in the event that you lose decision-making ability, but in the event that you're unlikely to regain your decision-making ability in future. So this would be more for cases of persons who have dementia, as you would commonly know it, dementia or Alzheimer's disease, for instance, who develop this condition. So you can set out this document, enduring power of attorney. You can choose different attorneys for different functions. So you might want to choose a person for healthcare, and you want to choose a different person for finances, because maybe the healthcare person doesn't have a good background in managing finances. They're not good with money. So you can choose different attorneys for different purposes. And like the advance directive, it gives you the opportunity to outline what you want in advance for your care and who you want to make the decisions for you in advance. Now, if you have not chosen someone for this, if you don't have an enduring power of attorney, there's still a provision in there for a financial manager that replaces the receivership provision that was there before. And what happens with a financial manager, if you have a nominated representative, that person can apply to the tribunal, which we mentioned later, to ask for someone to be appointed to manage your affairs. The tribunal will then select an appropriate person to manage your financial affairs, and that person would not be the same as a nominated representative. And it's important to have separation of responsibilities like that. It's more protection for you if one person is not managing everything. So that's what we try to do with the decision-making ability. So with care and treatment, as you know, at present, we have involuntary treatment, which is via what we call medically recommended status, which can last up to a year, and only one review at 6 months is required. So we try to give different provisions for care and treatment that have more accountability mechanisms involved, because the old way had a heavy focus on the involuntary admission and there was very little oversight. So persons who have mental illness shall be treated as far as possible at their home and near their home or in the community. And that's one of the tenets of this document as well, that we want to treat persons in conditions that are least restrictive. So you want to treat persons in conditions where there will be least restriction on their autonomy. They have more decision input into the decision making. And we have 3 different types of admission under this. We have the voluntary admission, which is basically the same as what we have now, but the difference is that persons who are admitted by voluntary admission, if they decide that they want to discharge themselves, because they have the right to discharge themselves. But if you think that they are not fit enough to be discharged, so they still might be a danger to themselves or others, and they need to stay in hospital, then that can be converted to the next one, which is the facilitated admission. You have 48 hours to do that. In the previous one, you had only 24 hours. They had to only give 24 hours notice, but now you have 48 hours. For the facilitated admission, your nominated representative can apply to a healthcare institution to have you admitted. And it requires 2 independent assessments, one from a psychiatrist and one from another mental health professional, whether that is a mental health nurse or another doctor, a medical practitioner. And this lasts only 30 days in the first instance. So it's not this year thing that you're signing off the bat. It lasts only 30 days first. And if at the end of 30 days, the person still meets the criteria, so there's still a danger to themselves or danger to others, and they need to be kept for longer, then you apply to the tribunal and you can get an additional 90 days for the person to be admitted if the tribunal agrees with you. The tribunal could disagree with me, the medical professional, and say, no, this person is well enough to go home. Evidence has presented on both cases. And so the tribunal could also make the decision that the person should be discharged. But if the tribunal agrees, they can be kept for additional 90 days. If you go back to the tribunal again after 90 days, then the next time period would be 120 days. And all time periods after that would be 120 days. So there's also a provision for emergency treatment, which is a type of involuntary admission. And this is only done if the person is in imminent danger to themselves or imminent danger to someone else. So they might cause someone else bodily harm. And this lasts for 72 hours, and it means that the person can be treated for either physical or mental illness for up to 72 hours under this provision, which is emergency treatment. Previously, we had something called emergency order, and the only place that person could be conveyed by emergency order was to the psychiatric hospital. But in this act, we've made provision for persons to have physical treatment as well, if that is what is needed, under this emergency treatment order that we have here. So in this act, we also say that no one should be subject to seclusion. And physical restraint should only be used as a last resort, prevent imminent harm, and it should never be used as punishment or convenience. So it should not be used as that no either. So what we realize a lot of the times when physical restraint or seclusion is used, it might not be used for the correct reasons, and it might be due to things that persons can't help, like staffing, for instance. So what we want is that physical restraint, we want to make it more monitored. So you can only do physical restraint for a maximum of 2 hours. After 2 hours, you have to apply to the tribunal for an extension. You have to do certain checks. You have to go and examine the person and make sure that they weren't harmed by the physical restraint. During physical restraint, the person has to be in line of sight of a medical professional, of a professional healthcare professional at all times. So you have to make sure that there's safety in it. And as I said, only as a last resort. So we have some special provisions in these legislative notes for children, adolescents, and parents. So we're saying that this is a new thing because the previous act didn't have any clear provisions for children or adolescents at all. So minors have the same rights as adults, including the right to access care. They have the right to take part as far as possible in their own care decisions. So you have to break down things to their level so that they can understand and let them have input into their own treatment and what they would like done in the case that they're unwell. And they also, parents or guardians will still be the persons who will decide for minors, but admission now requires 2 doctors or 2 professionals, so a psychiatrist again, or a medical practitioner, or another mental health professional to sign off on the need for this child to be admitted, because we absolutely only want to admit a child if it's a last resort and treatment cannot occur in the community. That child will not get better in the community. That would be the only reason that this child would be admitted. The admission of the minor is to a safe space, so they have the right to be conveyed to a safe space if they're in danger, and that safe space would more likely be a hospital. And under ordinary circumstances, all minors, if they're in hospital, they should be separated. They should be separated from adults, so they should be accommodated separately from adults. But we make it sure that under 13 years, no one under 13 years will be accommodated by adults under any circumstances. So over adults, there may be some special circumstances that require that, but under 13, absolutely not for any reason. So if a mother or a single parent of a child under 3 years old is admitted to a mental health facility, the child should be allowed to remain with that parent unless it is determined by the mental health professional that the parent will be a danger to that child. And the reason we did that is because during that time period, the parent-child bond is very important, and disrupting that bond can have some long-term consequences for mental health. And so we're not going to put a child in there for a parent who's going to be dangerous to that child. We will make the assessment. So you have to reassess every 15 days. So if at the beginning when the person was admitted and they were very unsettled and they were deemed that there would be a danger to the child, you reassess again in 15 days to see if that's still the case. If at some point it becomes safe, then the child will be allowed to stay with the parent. And if breastfeeding is occurring, for instance, then that will continue, and we will try to accommodate those things as far as possible. So for persons who are subject to criminal proceedings who may have or have a mental illness, we introduced something new that wasn't there before, which is called mental health diversion, which is focusing more on treatment versus the criminal proceedings. So diversion is used if a person has committed a minor offense. One of the most common things I see is persons who might be wandering onto someone's property, or maybe they break into someone's property because they think they have a delusion that they think that that property is theirs. So if it's just trespassing, I'm going to leave that to the legal minds. I don't know if that's a minor offense, but assuming that that's a minor offense, then if they trespass and it was because of their mental health condition, so the mental health condition played a role in it, and then if you do an assessment and treatment would improve the symptoms that led to the offense, and the person consents, so the person has to agree that they want treatment over doing the criminal proceedings. And believe you me, there are some persons out there who may choose to go through with criminal proceedings rather than treatment. So the person has to give their consent. And if this person doesn't pose any risk to the public, then we can go ahead with diversion. So they're put into a treatment process, whether that is in the community or whether that is in a hospital. That has to be determined by the assessment as to what is appropriate. And they would follow that treatment process. If at some point they decide they're not following that treatment process, they can always go back to the court system. So there's always a recourse in there. So we put 2 new bodies into this act. We have the Mental Health Commission. We have the Mental Health Commission at present, but the Mental Health Commission at present is an advisory body for the Ministry of Health. What we wanted was more oversight and regulation. So the Mental Health Commission in these legislative notes is transformed into a regulatory body. So we're looking at regulating, setting standards of accreditation for facilities, having individuals who provide mental health services, having them registered, making sure they have the appropriate qualifications to be practicing, and things like injury or death that occurs in a mental health facility, those things will be investigated. The Mental Health Commission will collect data on things like suicide rates. They will keep a register of advance directives, and they will also receive complaints. And we already heard that for things like restraint, that they would oversee things like restraint as well and make inquiries into those things. The second body is the Mental Health Tribunal, which is kind of like a court for mental health matters. And the tribunal will consist of 5 members. It would be either a judge, a sitting judge, a retired judge, or a senior lawyer, I think with 10 years experience. It can be 2 mental health professionals. Then we have someone representing a nonprofit or civil society organization, and then a lay member of the public who may just have an interest in mental health matters. Now, when the matters go to this tribunal. We mentioned some of them already. So persons may appeal their facilitated admission, say I was wrongfully admitted, I don't need to be in here, I want to be discharged. That will go to the tribunal. The tribunal will hear such matters and render a decision within 7 days. Or it could be that a person feels that their human rights, their rights have been violated while they were admitted or someplace else in a workplace or something like that. They can also take those things to the tribunal. So the tribunal will now have the exclusive jurisdiction of hearing matters related to mental health. And that's how we will improve oversight and regulation going forward. And I think that is the end. I hope that you were blessed by that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sue. I just want to introduce the panelists before I come to you, Cindy. Cindy is going to give the spoken word presentation. Dr. Elizabeth Rochester, who's a consultant psychiatrist. And of course, you met Dr. Sue, she's the deputy chairman. She's a consultant psychiatrist based at the Psychiatric Hospital. The chairman is Dr. Maisha Emmanuel. She's the senior lecturer at University of the West Indies, a consultant psychiatrist at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And of course, Dr. Brian McLachlan, who's a senior consultant psychiatrist also at the Psychiatric Hospital. So thank you so much for being here. And we're really excited to get into the question aspect following Dr. Sue's very precise and short presentation. We thank you so much for that. At this time, I'd like to invite Cindy Celeste, who is going to give a spoken word performance entitled Imposter Syndrome.
They walk among us, hidden in plain sight, waiting till the time is right to take flight. The fright is palpable. There are 8 billion imposters living among us. A new one is beamed up to this ship each second. No one gets off scot-free. Communication always seems to be sabotaged. Every one of us is running around with the ability to see, but probably only 3 feet in front of us. Everywhere else is shrouded in darkness, tests to task the psyche at every corner. New report. Yellow's aspirations found dead in navigation. Probably in the middle of charting a course to their dream destination, no one else was around. Discuss. Watch how everybody vents their frustrations. No one can decide if anyone is suspicious in this bunch, but Blue wants somebody to tag along for moral support on his medical scan. Skip vote. Blue has made a buddy system of people he doesn't know if he can trust to lull him into a false sense of security. A couple thousand followers on social, so he's probably doing this thing right. Even if by night end he wonders who his real friends are after all. Everyone on the internet just swallows the picture-perfect existence they've been spoon-fed. Emergency meeting. Everybody's been talking lately about this therapy thing, so he's probably got a better chance of working than whatever he's accustomed to doing. And everyone automatically assumes that Blue is okay. Without listening or checking in, Blue has left the game. Something about a lack of proper connection stealing him away. But everyone else just keeps playing. Like Pink, who is priming his shields and erecting fresh walls to protect from his next heartbreak. Red, who is rewiring after his last heartache. See, these mortal engines are out of alignment. Someone has got to be diverting power to keep fueling this broken system. The system seems like it's constantly on the verge of a massive meltdown. All but a few of us are trying to fix it. Others, we can't tell who's faking moves or breaking beneath the ruse. emergency meeting. Purple has become perplexed that there's somebody following him. The perp sticks to the shadows so no one knows who he is, or if he exists, skip, vote, report. Purple's found dead in electrical. He was just trying to turn the lights on so he wouldn't have to see his monsters anymore. People only believe the tales and the fears of the living when they become ghost stories. Purple, well, I bet he don't seem so crazy no more. For Cyan, the air at the summit, at the peak, seems to be thinning just when he's so close to reaching what he's been aiming for. So he pauses for a second to catch his breath, and Green passes and catches him mid-step. Report. Green accuses Cyan of self-sabotage for the simple act of only being able to stand too still, and Cyan can't tell if he actually fought back or if he just signed his will. The votes are counted. The results are in. Neglected colors will be ejected. 8 billion imposters still remain, and we are all just trying to win the same game. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy Celeste, performing Imposter. We're going to come to a conversation about the draft mental health legislative notes, and this is where we get your questions. Before we do that, I do want to say a special good evening to Dr. Sonia Brown, who is the MP for St. Philip North, who's very busy this evening, but has decided to come and join us. Thank you so much. And we do also want to encourage questions from those who have joined us on YouTube. We look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions. So who's going to be the yes? Yes. Okay. Where's your microphone? Yes, please.
Yes. Yes, hi, great evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Kamal Mason. I am a student nurse, and I have in my hand ID, and my, it's not laminated, that's why I have to keep it in the plastic. My mental health, it says Ministry of Health and Wellness, Barber Psychiatric Hospital, OPC, which is an outpatients clinic. Now, before I get to my question, my solution for to end the stigma is something from this to this. A mental health, a mental health ID where you actually level up the mental health community like me to find jobs, but actually instead of having just giving them appointment dates, giving them actually something to do so that they don't end up back in the cycle of mental health, like what was just so ably said by the poem. So if you can give them a mental health ID where they're coming to clinic every 2 weeks like me or whatever, in terms of being able to level up and actually sort out for a job, something to do that will show their mental health identity, where you actually give them skills and level them up while they're on their journey at clinic until they finish with their follow-up. And that leads to my question. Yeah, sorry for that. So, government is a teacher of rights unto freedoms and duties to create ministers, and the law, the police, is a teacher of muscularity unto discipline to produce rank and file and marshals. So my question is, what are you going to do at crisis point for police officers who are untrained, who do not actually know how to like all they will give is a hello or a full Nelson to those who are going through a mental health crisis. And at that point, they actually need from the police. Instead of a hand to punch them and hurt them, something to help them, to really help them to get to where they need to be to get their medication and get to clinic. So that is really my two-part question. What are you doing for the police in terms of really leveling them up and helping them to learn techniques to really help people who will go into this new legislation for the rights? And what are you doing for a mental health ID for people who want to get jobs and level up so that they can actually work while they're on their 5-year follow-up to finish this mental health course that I'm on now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who's going to take that question? Dr. Emmanuel, go ahead.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that question. So yes, in writing these draft notes, we did recognize the importance of having to train all first responders. You specifically said police, but also, people in the ambulance, first responders to crisis situations or incidents, because we do recognize there is a way that people need to understand how to approach someone who may be in the middle of a crisis, and you're not, born knowing that information. So a lot of training will be required for all first responders. So, for example, right now in the ambulance system, if you go to somebody's home for a medical issue, presumably a physical health issue, and the person says, actually, no, I'm not going anywhere, then the ambulance, they leave you there and they go. But obviously in a mental health crisis where you may not have the capacity to make the right decision in terms of accessing care, it would be quite negligent to leave the person at home because they're saying, no, I don't want to go. And so we do have to train all first responders about how you appropriately approach someone in a crisis so that they do get the care that they require.
And the second part of the question about having an ID or some kind of identification and some kind of programs to help those with mental illness who want to get out to work and be contributing part of society.
Yeah, so again, we do recognize the role of supportive workspaces, and I think a big part of that comes down to public education, employers, but the people in general, so that you recognize everybody has the right to access work, and the work, whatever accommodations that need to be made for that person should be made, and not just say, oh, this person, because they have to go to clinic or because they're not functioning at the level that we would want, that means I'm not going to hire them. So there's a lot of public education that is required, as I said, and a lot of workplace employer education that's required to address those issues.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Rochester.
So I think one of the things that's interesting about this question is that it highlights that a whole government approach is needed for mental health, because you spoke to the police, we spoke about first responders. Everything doesn't have to be centered within the Ministry of Health. Everything will absolutely not be centered within the Ministry of Health. Our wonderful lived experience speaker who started talking about things happening from primary school, that's a reminder of the role of Ministry of Education. We're talking about Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Youth, Home Affairs, Labor, especially if we're thinking about protecting mental health rights in the workplace. So definitely going forward, one of the things that we need to keep talking about and having the public, all of you, advocate for is a whole government approach, an intra-government approach to supporting mental health and mental wellness as well.
Okay. All right, next question, please.
Hi,
yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, good night. My name is Shane Phillips. I just have a general question for Dr. Sue. You said with the autonomy that the mental health patient will now have in terms of not having to take medication if they don't want to, right? It's a general thing that most patients don't want to take medication. So I was wondering, like, in an event where you might be getting an adverse reaction to a particular medication and you didn't want to take that one anymore, instead of stopping cold turkey, because you know you're supposed to stop the medication just cold turkey and without your advice to the doctor or whatever, would the mental health professional being you off for the medication correctly, or when you say that you don't want to take that anymore, that's the end of it?
Ironically, I think, as I said, a lot of persons get upset when they hear that, but that's something that we do in the community service all the time. I think a lot of persons are accustomed to hospital-based care, where basically if you're in hospital most of the time, you don't have that decision-making ability. So the decisions are being, in terms of treatment, are being made for you as it is now. But in the community setting where I work, it is we work with the client. You're a part of the treatment process. So if you come in to me and you say, Doc, this medication is causing XYZ side effect, and I can see that it's causing XYZ side effect, I'm going to work with you to try to improve that. Either I'm going to change the medication, I'm going to decrease the medication, extend your visit interval. We're going to work together. We're doing it as a team to try to get you better. Because for me, it's as important. Yes, it's important to treat your symptoms, but for me, functionality is important. Okay. So functionality includes, how are you going to get a job if you're going to the job and you're shaking all the time and you can't even hold a pen properly, for instance? That's going to stop you from being able to function. To me, that's on equal footing with treating symptoms.
Okay, all right, thanks. I'll answer my question.
All right, we have a question from YouTube. What about those who aren't able to mentally make those decisions and they have no next of kin or power of attorney? I'm thinking of those who have no one. Will the state make decisions for them?
Yes, as happens already, when there's no family or no next of kin, then the managing clinician would make the decision in the best interest of the person. And so we already do that, and that will continue in that circumstance.
Okay. I have a question from the audience. Yes, Dr. Brown.
Thank you. I enjoyed the presentation, which I witnessed so far. My question is around two things. Basically, legality. I haven't had a chance to read the new legislation yet. One of the things is you mentioned about decision-making and choosing your next of kin. One question I have, can that be overturned? In other words, I'm married, and I choose my next-door neighbor who is a better friend than my husband. When it gets to a point where I do not have the mental capacity, can that be overturned by the husband who legally is the next of kin?
It depends. So you can apply to the tribunal if you think that that person is not acting in your husband's best, or the person's not acting in your best interest. So if the person has chosen a nominated representative that then is not acting in accordance with their preferences or not in their best interest, someone else can appeal to the tribunal. Even the mental health professional can appeal to the tribunal and say, we want this person removed as a nominated representative. So what we've done with these, what we are planning to do with the updates is there's always a recourse.
And this one might be a little complicated. In my world, I face a lot of instances. I call it elder abuse. They might not necessarily be elderly, depending on the dementia, where the banks, and you can understand it, frameworks like that, where a relative who had noticed early on that the patient's capacity, mental capacity is dwindling, early stages. And they go to the banks, and up to this week I had one, accounts are wiped out. They find a lawyer that would say this person is in good mental health, a will is written. What part, in terms of the law within the legislation, I'm trying to figure out how to put it, can protect a patient in a case like that? In other words, if I go to the bank and my sister, who is no good to me and whatever, took out all my money because she ended up with a joint account. I signed over and did not know. What recourse, in truth and in fact, do I have, or does my daughter, who is the next of kin, have in fighting it? Because the banks often do not take the blame on something like that, which makes sense because they're not mental health practitioners.
Yeah, I think, but first of all, it often falls to the psychiatrist to make that determination as if somebody has the capacity to make a decision or not. And because we are often in a circumstance where we are independent, meaning we don't know the person, we don't know the family, there's nothing in it, so to speak, for us. We're just giving you a medical assessment. Now, in terms of the new act, that's where when Dr. Sue was talking about having an enduring power of attorney or having your representative, nominated representative, meaning upfront, before you lose capacity to make that decision, you are able to say, I trust XYZ, I want this person to make those decisions for me. Now, obviously, sometimes, you know, that horse leaves the stable and the person has not made that decision, and as you said, you know, many times people are, you know, abused and their monies are removed and so on. So then it takes a family member, or in circumstances where it's not the family member, again, the practitioner can say to the tribunal, you know, I'm concerned about this patient of mine whom I have noticed X, Y, Z is happening, and have them intervene on behalf of the patient. So we try to put things in, but obviously we cannot cover all scenarios, but as much as possible, we've tried to take all of those issues into consideration and protect the person. Because by the time you're having dementia, you're not able in the late stages to make those decisions, and people do, to your point, fall victim. Yeah.
I'm just going to throw something out there for you, Chairman. Considering that would be a form of abuse or abuse of a person's rights, could they? My apologies. Right, I was saying I'm going to throw something out there for the chairman to see if we can think on this. I consider that an abuse of the person's rights as well, and technically you can appeal to the tribunal. So if you're the daughter and you realize this has happened to your parent, you could technically go to the tribunal and say this has happened, and they can render a judgment. It is how far their judgment would go in a case like that. So I don't know if that judgment would mean that you would get the money back. So that's the part I don't know. But there would be some penalty, I am assuming.
Yeah, and remember the tribunal has recourse to the higher court. So it doesn't just stop at the tribunal. So something like that where you can have criminal charges and all of that. If you're stealing, then that will go up to the higher court.
All right, we have another question from YouTube. If a deaf person were to have challenges with mental illness, how would they seek help?
In the past, because this has happened, that we have had persons who are either hearing impaired or deaf have to access services. And often, sometimes they've had contact with services that do provide sign language and sign language interpreters. And certainly we would make it our business to contact one of those professionals and have that person be available for appointments with either outpatient or if the person is admitted to come and do sign language interpretation for us. And the hospital will actually, well, let me not say they will pay for it, but that has happened, that we've obviously borne the cost of doing that in ensuring that the person who is hearing impaired is able to express themselves. And we get to understand what is happening for the purposes of diagnosis and making that assessment necessary for treatment.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Because we have quite, yes, ma'am. Can we get a microphone to the lady to the front? There you. You have a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Sir, go ahead.
I have a live mic in front of a speaker, so I'm just going to move.
Okay.
When I walked in this evening, my name is Zariah Yacob. I live just down the road. When I walked in this evening, I was given one of these flyers, and there was a QR code that I was told that I could scan to read the draft legislative notes. So I scanned the QR code, I go open the link, can't open the link. Why? No Wi-Fi. What we have right now in Barbados is a lot of different systems that rely on each other and do not work together and sometimes don't even communicate. You can't give me a QR code and say, everything that you need, you will get from scanning this QR code, and then not give me Wi-Fi. Something is broken there. The systems aren't working together. That's one of our major problems. The other one is well illustrated by our friend, this pigeon up here, who at some point flew in and Now, pigeons, they fly up, especially a pigeon of that size. They fly up. It flew in, and it flew up, and it's stuck, and it's just been stuck this whole time. It can't get out because the only direction that it knows to fly is the direction where it's already stuck. It's never going to get out unless somebody is not just like there when it, hits its head and has a concussion and falls down, but is actually looking to see how we can get it down. We have a lot of holes in society that people with mental health are falling through at various stages of their lives. When a child's parents get divorced, where is the divorce counselor for the child? When a child is doing poorly in school, who is checking to see if there's a necessary learning disability assessment for that child? When you see a child who is isolating themselves, doesn't have any friends, isn't doing very well, who is checking to see if that child could potentially be self-harming? All of these are safety nets that people are supposed to have, that are supposed to be there to catch people preventatively. On the topic of responding to crisis, there was something interesting that I noticed in the presentation on the legislation, which is that if you want to use restraints, if you need to use restraints for a patient, you can apply them, and then you have to apply with the tribunal every 2 hours to basically keep them on. And then the tribunal was described as basically one 5-member panel somewhere. Is every polyclinic in Barbados all supposed to be making calls to this one 5-member tribunal? Like if everybody has a patient who is at risk to themselves or other people, every 2 hours just to keep this person in restraints? The problem that we have here is that this is a human resources problem. Talk about training first responders. What are we doing to get mental health practitioners being sent out on calls with or instead of police? A lot of times, I have a cousin who lived in the US and he was mentally ill. He goes outside brandishing a hairbrush and the police get there and they shoot him, and they shoot him a lot. He dies on that street because every problem is a nail when your only tool is a hammer. It being a human resource problem, there's a very simple solution that for some reason has not been taken up. When I and students like me head to the University of the West Indies, we think, this country has a mental health problem, I want to be part of the solution. We do an undergraduate degree in psychology. And then we check and see, okay, so I guess I gotta go on and do a master's in counseling psychology. Nope. There's 5 different arts courses and 10 different business courses that the government supports, and if you want to do counseling psychology, I hope you have $30,000. That's the human resource problem that the government has the ability to solve, obviously. Finally, we talked a lot about the community tonight. Are community centers, do we actually have functioning community centers with resources for people where, again, we're not just responding only when somebody reaches a crisis point, but long, long before that? And are our polyclinics genuinely well-staffed enough? And I think anybody who goes into a polyclinic regularly knows the answer to that question, but I'm not going to say it. To deal with people who have mental health situations as easily as they can deal with people who have injuries or just need more medication and they're waiting in there for hours and hours in that waiting room. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, those are a lot of questions. They're very good questions. So who's going to start? You, Dr. Emmanuel? Go ahead.
Sure. Yes, thank you very much. So you pointed out a lot of the gaps, the holes in the system. What we set out to do when we in the commission started this process was very much to identify those holes. In fact, one of the things that really got us started was 2 years ago. I don't know if you remember when there was a spate of deaths by suicide among young people between April and July. Quite a high number, alarmingly so. And some of the issues identified there, some of the things you mentioned about people not having access to care and so on. So we genuinely started off looking at where we were, what were some of the holes in the system, and how do we start that process of plug in those holes, so to speak. And so the act and what we've done is this beginning stages of that process, right? So the law tells you where we want to be. We now need to put all the infrastructure in place to get there. But we need to start with the law because that frames out what needs to happen. And if we don't start with that, then we're just kind of running around, doing a little something here and a little something there. And so we must start with the law. So for example, when we say we've written this act to international standard, and international standard says that you must have training of the police and the first responders and so on, then we would expect to then have those systems in place based on our specific needs, okay? Because we also have to be realistic. In wanting international standards, we know we're going to always have resource constraints. We know we need more people in the polyclinic system. Right now, 1 day a week is clearly not enough, or the 2 days in the QEH, clearly not enough. And so we have to start off with what is the ideal thing and work towards fulfilling the needs of the population. But if we keep saying, well, we don't have enough psychologists or we don't have enough people with mental health training, so we can't get that done, then we will never move. You have to write it to the ideal and force it till you get to where you want to go. So I hear you loud and clear. You are right. There are lots of places where people fall through, but we have to focus on building our capacity up to that and plugging all of those holes that you have so eloquently described. So thank you again for your response.
Yes, thank you very much. You go to the lady at the front. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Ashanti. I just want to thank him again because he answered some of my questions and you answered some of them, but I just want to go over them again. One of my questions would have been, what would the community-based treatment look like? Like he said, there aren't a lot of communities that are actually up and running. And my second question would be, could the process where being assigned to a mental health officer at the clinic be a little less lengthy? So the story behind that was I was actually a patient at a psychiatric hospital and I was transferred to a polyclinic. It took 6 to 7 months before I got a call from that mental health officer, and I was still going to work, I was still doing all of these things, I was still struggling, and I was still in a hole. And then when I met her, I had to go every other Tuesday, and she would call just to check in, and this was at her discretion. This wasn't like in the part of her guidelines of what she needed to do. And I was so lucky that my employer offered to pay for treatment for me rather than me going to the polyclinic because she saw that it was immediate. And if I didn't have that and I had fallen into this system of being overlooked, what would that look like now? And another thing for that would be back to the community, because if there was something more close-knit in that community for people to just come and express their feelings, to know that you are not alone. There are other people around you that feel this way, that probably live next door, and you don't even know it. But it is so closed up, it is so silent, and people are afraid to talk about their feelings, are afraid to talk about things. Sorry, I just looking wrong. I realized that everybody looking at me.
Well, you do have the microphone.
Yes.
That's okay. Go ahead. You're making a good point. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know what would be the process of that going forward and how we can close that gap. It was very long. And it took me a while to get to the psychiatric hospital, and for it to take so long for them actually to see someone, because I went to the hospital, they gave me medication, and I didn't feel like medication was it for me. It made me slow. I started to feel just drained, and I was like, this is not for me. I stopped taking it, and I stopped going. Because when I went, I told the doctor, and that was the only thing that she said we can do. And if this is the only straight path you want to walk on, and I want to zigzag, and you don't want to zigzag, well, I'm sorry. So I decided I will sit home and wait until I get that call. And when my employer realized that this is not helping, this is not going anywhere, and I'm actually going further into this hole rather than coming out, she decided to pay for my treatment.
Okay, thank you so much for your contribution. Dr. Sue?
Yeah, I'll take that one because I was sitting here trying to figure out what could have happened, and the only thing I can figure out is that, was it the psychologist who was supposed to contact you? Because that is the only cadre of professional that I could think of that it would be that long, because at one point they had a very huge backlog of clients waiting for care because they were, well, very understaffed. But since then, we have added 3 psychologists to the community services. So previously, the community services didn't have any psychologists. So the psychologists were all based in the psychiatric hospital. Before COVID, they had started a program where they would come out to at least one catchment among the community teams. We have 3 teams. And they would come, so for me, they would come to the glebe. Unfortunately, other persons from the other parishes would have to come to glebe to see the psychologist, but it was the best we could have done with the staffing at the time. But then when COVID came, that stopped happening. So then after COVID, since COVID now, the ministry added 3 counseling psychologists to the community services. So we have our own dedicated psychologists now. So similar to how I move to a different clinic basically every day, the psychologist's actions kind of mirror mine. So they go to a different clinic so that each clinic now has services available, psychological services available. So it should not take that long. Most times when I make a referral to the psychologist now, she's able to see the person by the next week. So things have improved considerably since they've started working. So for a normal referral to community service, like if you were referred for a home visit by a community nurse or myself, it would not take that long to be seen. So that's why I was puzzled.
Yes, Dr. Rochester, go ahead.
So before we move on, I just would like to address some of the points around access to care for children that were brought up by the previous speaker. So first of all, one of the things about the current legislation is that it will serve as a reminder that children have the right to access mental health care, because I think that often that gets lost. I think all of us here can speak to meeting families, guardians, and there is a discussion about, oh, I don't know what they have to be fussing about or be anxious about. And sometimes caregivers can be a little bit dismissive. They can be very supportive, but some can be dismissive. Not just caregivers, other people who have to work with children, work with teenagers, work with vulnerable young people. So one of the things about this legislation is that it's very clear, it's enshrined in law, that a child, a teenager, a young person, an adult, an older person, all of these people are within their rights to have access to mental health care. So that's one thing. The second thing, I think we'd spoken earlier about intra-governmental collaboration. So when it comes to mental health with children and teenagers, we can't really deliver the kind of care that's needed unless we are working with Ministry of Education, Ministry of Youth, and the ministry that's responsible for social services. So it's all of these agencies working together that will help to boost the resources and the services that are required to take care of the mental health of our children and teenagers. But I must say there are some services in place already. I'm not sure if we have any Ministry of Education colleagues in the audience this evening, but if they were here, they would tell you there are, apart from the guidance counselors, there is an Office of Student Services based at the Ministry of Education, and a large part of their role is around mental health promotion, education, and also responding to any issues that are raised about children within the schools, whether by a parent, because parents can go directly to the office, or whether from the school itself. So there are definitely some resources available. I think if they were here, they would say that they could do with more personnel, more resources, more money, more everything. But as Dr. Emmanuel pointed out, our lack of resources can't delay or stop us from providing the best possible care that we can offer at this time. So there are some resources, and I think you mentioned being at university. So of course the university has a health center, tertiary institutions also have health centers. So it is possible to access mental health care in that way.
All right, we have Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Blackham. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can I just quickly add to what Dr. Rochester
Yes,
is
please.
saying?
Go ahead.
And I'm not speaking for the Ministry of Education, but I do know in the past few years they have added to the cadre of professionals in the schools. They've added social workers, they've added counselors who work along with the guidance counselors. They have safety officers. And so we're often getting referrals because those are the professionals who are recognizing that the children who are coming to school do have difficulties, and so they are referring them to us as well. So that is certainly occurring.
Thank you so much. Fabian, I'm going to come to you, but this young lady has the microphone in her hand and she's been standing. Yes. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Patsy. My question is, where do adults with special needs who have mental challenges, where do they go for assistance? We have those individuals who are not able to express themselves, and we have some medical professionals who don't seem to know how to ask the appropriate questions. Because you might ask them where is certain, why, but they can't express themselves, they can't tell you. Or you ask them yes, no question, they will always say yes. My question is, where do they go? Because we have lots of young persons, especially special needs with mental health, and they're just there. Some are not even diagnosed. Where do they go? Because I don't know where to. Because my brother has special needs, and he's going to be 50. So if something happens to him, where do I go? That's my question. What provision is being made right now?
Thank you for your question. Yes, Dr. Sue.
I'm trying to decide the facets of that question because up to today I was seeing someone who is on the spectrum and more severe, kind of nonverbal. And it's one of the gaps that we have in our society now is treatment for persons who are on the spectrum and they're on the lower end of the spectrum, or maybe they have severe behavioral problems along with that. A lot of these kids, I find, end up not being in school, not getting an education, which is lamentable, honestly. It's very sad. And one of the only places that they can go is to us, in community services or the psychiatric hospital. When they have to get medical care, I know my colleagues in the GP section will try very hard to understand what is happening with them, but it can be difficult. So you're raising a very important point, because up to today, I was discussing that with the relatives and saying that that is one of our major gaps, that we really don't have many services. I was referring this young lady for the occupational therapy department, having a discussion with our therapist and saying, what can you do? Because I want to know what she's capable of. A lot of persons have assumed that she's not capable of doing certain things, but I think she's capable of much more than that.
Because the thing is, a lot of them can't get there, and most of the times, it's always the mothers who are looking after these young adults. And they don't have a lot of financial support because they quit their jobs to look after these young persons. So if something happens to them, where do these young people go? What facilities are available for them? They can't, and I wouldn't recommend a psychiatric hospital either. So we really have to look at where are we going to take, and they're not children, they're young adults, they're adults. So I think we still, people, because of their function, we still treat them like children. So what is there for them? Where do they go?
What I was saying in an earlier interview is that the direction we want to go in is we don't just want to have, right now the community services, we have myself, like a psychiatrist, we have a psychologist, we have a social worker, and we have our community mental health nurses. But we want to go in the direction where we have more services for rehabilitation in our polyclinics as well. So instead of me having to refer this person to occupational therapy in the hospital, I would love to have an occupational therapist who is in the polyclinic services as well. The problem we have when the commission was trying to do the mental health directory, what I discovered is that there are very few occupational therapists trained for mental health. So we have a lot of occupational therapists, but very few have specialized in the mental health area for whatever reason. There's only one person who's really doing it privately. And I don't think he's doing it privately anymore because he got a new role. But anyhow, so it goes back to what the young man was saying. We need to look at these categories of staff and try to improve or make more available the training programs and boost the training so we have more personnel available. That's the direction to go in. And it's things like recreational therapy. We only have one recreational therapist. So we need to get more persons available at your community level that is more accessible. But what we've put in the act for now is that if it's not accessible to you at your community level and you're willing to access that service in the psychiatric hospital, we will provide the transportation for that. So similar to how I think disabilities unit has transportation, the government will bear the cost of transporting persons from their community area to the psychiatric hospital. If that's the only place where the service is available, or anywhere else where the service is available, transportation will be provided, because I know that that is sometimes what prevents persons from accessing the care, is that they don't have the transportation.
All right, I see some hands. I don't know who's in what order, but I see Fabian has the microphone. So Fabian, go ahead. And
hi, good night, everyone. I'm Fabian Sargent, Men Empowerment Network Support. I don't think this is the forum for me to raise everything that I would like to raise, based on what I see. But what I would like to find out, I guess at the most surface level, is how do you propose we deal with situations where we have persons expressing suicide? And I get a lot of these situations where there are men who want to commit suicide or expressing suicidal tendencies, and you cannot get them to the assessment unit. Then what? My experience in the past with the community health nurse has been one that I really am not pleased. Honestly, I don't think that my experience dealing with situations with the community mental health nurse has not been good. So what next? How do we deal with that? I find myself and my team extremely tired because we can't get these men from home at the house. The family can't go sleep. The woman can't sleep because she feels as if he can put a knife to her throat, or the children are late the house or something. We can't get to the assessment unit, then what? You know, does the act address that? How do we deal with that? And I'm telling you that is extremely prevalent. Like there's so many, is on daily, weekly, you're getting men who want to commit suicide, who stress, extremely stressed out. And I feel like something there's no way to turn. And I'll give you this one. My one situation that really stuck out with me was a guy that I got to the assessment unit. It's very high risk, drug use, marijuana and alcohol, strong family history, and the psychiatric hospital did not have room for him. He was sent back home with an outpatient's appointment. For 4 weeks, nearly every day I had to keep in contact with this individual to make sure that everything is intact. Do you want to know where he is now? Dodds. And I'm of the opinion that that situation could have been avoided if he was institutionalized. So when I look at this paper and I see that, you know, in terms of institutionalization, you've got to get 2 signatures, I also want to know how that is going to work, because with that particular situation so fresh in my mind, you know, I don't know if that really would work, or how long will that process take? Because then you put families at risk by sending some high-risk people back into society because, yes, you're trying to practice community nursing and community health, and I understand all of that. But I can speak to the cases that I know that have not been turning out well with trying to deal with it at the community level. So how do we deal with this situation? Particularly suicide first, because that is a very big one, and I don't know where to turn. You know, you can't get nobody from the house. Men are moving, nobody ain't going nowhere. You can't get them at psyche. What next?
Yeah, thank you for that. So,
thank you.
Whenever somebody presents with a high risk of suicide, of course, it's always very difficult, especially, which is often the case when the person is not willing to come into hospital, which is where, if you're high risk, that's where you need to be. And to your point, when you then get the person to the psychiatric hospital, if there's no space available, then as you described, the person was sent home. Now, oftentimes when people are at high risk, they are admitted. Obviously, I wasn't there with that particular case, but once you are high risk for suicide, you come into hospital and you're treated there until the assessment is that your risk has decreased. And I'm saying decreased because it's never zero, but at least it should be low, and you should have some level of confidence that this person is now at low risk of harming themselves. What we are proposing with the new act is to have stronger community services, so that way before, to the example you're given, the person gets to that point where the risk is high, you're able to intervene and assist that person so that they don't need to come into hospital. But that takes much more than having a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a social worker. As I said in the previous meeting, I think the psychiatrist should be dealing with people with severe and enduring mental illness. So if you think of it on a pyramid, at the top of the pyramid, people who fall anywhere below that should have other mental health interventions that are available to them way before things escalate to that point. But I do take your point, that person who is high risk should not be at home. And so it means we need to have a lot more services in place and a lot better access to care, so that situations like that you're describing become less and less, and obviously, ideally, if that does not occur at all. So yes, I do take your point, and it underscores what we've been talking about, the need for more professionals and different grades of professionals so that people can get the care that they need.
If I can speak to perhaps current circumstances, I think if you have someone at home who's threatening suicide, I'm understanding you saying you didn't have success with the community mental health nurse. I'm not sure the police had been contacted with regards to that individual, especially if that individual is threatening other people in the home. But what often will happen is the community nurse and the police will work together to get that person to the hospital. But to be frank, if you are having difficulties with a community mental health nurse, there is usually someone you can call above that person. Okay? I get calls all the time where situations have occurred and a complaint of some kind is being made, and I investigate. And often when I investigate, there's a lot of misunderstanding. But the point is, it isn't so that you're saying I'm having problems with the community mental health nurse. The community mental health nurse has a boss, that boss has another boss, and again, we all operate really and truly to try and find solutions to situations like this. With regards to someone coming to the hospital, I think, and again, no admitting space, and again, I don't know the specifics of the case you're describing, but it should not be if that person was deemed to be at high risk and there's no space, that nothing should happen from the hospital for 4 weeks. It should be certainly that that person is checked on. It should be, as I've said, that perhaps this matter goes a little higher with regards to how quickly can we find space to bring in that individual. I don't know what happened in this particular circumstance. My point is that there are ways to affect things when at the level that you're doing them is not working.
You having a follow-up question, Fabian? Go ahead.
Yes. So a few situations I've had that the police would have said that, no crime has been committed here. And I guess the police being overwhelmed, sometimes to my mind, it seems as if, or we could deal with this tomorrow. A situation that you don't know what tomorrow will bring, If a person is just home, and the police might like, he ain't hitting nobody, he ain't shooting nobody nor there yet, so it ain't a crime. So it's okay to say, get the police. And so, in essence, the systems that should be working sometimes are not working. So all these systems that I'm hearing about, I am holding my breath. Well, I try hard not to that these systems actually work, that you find the manpower, the human resources that were mentioned earlier, to facilitate and fill the gaps. Because we can talk all we want about mental health. If we do not have the manpower to facilitate and to make the systems and to make the engine work, then we'll just be having talk shops all the time. And the situation that we are in now, anyone in the mental field field know that we are inundated with mental health challenges. I think a lot of it came back from COVID, but there's a great need for these services right now. We need to get the systems working. We need to get them working. And I feel like we just talk more than we actually act. So I'm really hoping that something positive come out of this.
Thanks so much. All right, we have a few questions. I saw some hands. Cindy's hand was good. Dr. Sue, I'm sorry. I have to keep looking across there first. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it would be remiss of me not to mention that we have Lifeline Barbados. So the Ministry of Health and Wellness and every person on this podium here was involved in that effort to get that hotline up and running. And I've been involved because Dr. McLaughlin and myself sometimes provide clinical oversight for the hotline. So I've been involved with some of those calls, and some of them are high-risk persons. And what I like about the hotline is then you have the person on the hotline is kind of like the person in the control center. So the person in the hotline, and then there's the manager. There's the person on the line, keeping the person on the line to make sure that they're not going to do anything and talking to them and keeping them talking. Well, we try to arrange for them to get assistance. So then the manager and myself will be on the phone to the police, on the phone to the community nurse. We're all calling to try and get services arranged, and we do not leave the case until we know that the person has been seen. So we see that case through from start to end, so that those kind of gaps do not occur. And I just want to say that the hotline is doing marvelous work.
All right, who has the microphone? Oh, Cindy. Go ahead, Cindy.
Hi, thank you. I'm coming from the perspective of a teaching artist. So while I do perform, and I think that a lot of artists also have their second job, their other job as teaching, I wonder if any consideration at all has been given to, I've heard you mention the Ministry of Education, Labor, those that deal with the social work, etc. Has any consideration been given to the relationship between mental health and like cultural practice or like art? Because I also do a lot of art outreach work, and within that space, what ends up happening, and with young people especially, what ends up happening is that when we are doing the outreach work through art, then they find a foothold or a safe space or a safety with us as teaching artists. And there's a part of that that is, one, not all of us are particularly well equipped to handle that, one. And then two, on the other side of it, artists themselves very often have their own mental health struggles to deal with. So I'm wondering what consideration, if any, has been given to the correlation between cultural practice and mental health. Thanks.
Thanks, Cindy. That's a good question.
Well, okay, I'll answer. I think we all give consideration to cultural factors. So we know that taking consideration of the person's cultural background is very important in framing how we treat the person. And I can speak for myself, and I know it's also a thing at the psychiatric house. We include art in a lot of our treatment plans. So I've recently started heading a program for suicide prevention, and every health fair that I've had so far event has included art, because I think, forms of expression and creativity are very important for mental health. So the first one I had sip and paint without the sipping, and persons really enjoyed that. And the second one I had tie-dye, and I was shocked. I got 24 shirts, and I was shocked at the response. They ran out of shirts. People were asking for more. People were so happy. Because there's a release that you find when you take place in these kind of artists. It doesn't have to be art in that form. I mean, come in, like your beautiful performance today. But I find that these things offer you a release. So I think it's very important to integrate that into mental health care. And our recreational therapist, she includes that in a lot of the therapies that she does with clients. I like to go and look at the pictures that they've done. So yes, we do take those things into consideration.
Sorry for the follow-up. one of the reasons I asked that is because when they end up finding safe spaces in something that is not like the very formal, I've heard you talking a lot about community care. And when we find our participants finding safe space within the work that we do, so for example, I did in 2018, I believe, I did a gender-based violence workshop with 4th to 6th formers. And out of that came a lot of conversations that went beyond gender-based violence and towards what was going on in their lives and their heads. And at that time, I was pretty much fresh out of university, and I didn't know how to hold that space. So is there also some sort of like training? I think somebody mentioned different levels of training, but some sort of training that can be afforded to artists, especially, well, not necessarily especially, but community workers who are not necessarily mental health professionals in the big scheme of the word, but who are working with and in community, because that's something we care about as well.
Yeah.
Well, at least I do.
Excellent point. And I think I was kind of alluding to that earlier when I said leave the psychiatrist for a particular type of intervention. And with that in mind, the ministry has already started through the psychiatric hospitals to train people in psychological first aid. And there's also mental health first aid, meaning you don't need to have a degree in psychiatry or psychology. These are the basic things you can do to assist somebody who may be in crisis or somebody who may have, some mental health challenge. And so that training has already started through the psychiatric hospital for exactly that reason. Right? Because we do recognize if you wait for a psychiatrist or a psychologist to intervene, the majority of people would not get the care that they need. But to your point, I think that's an excellent point you've made, and just underscoring that, as many people as possible who can be trained up, that will go a long way in helping achieve what we're trying to achieve. Thank you for that.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to you. I just want everybody to get a chance to get a question. Yes, sir, you have the microphone. Please, go ahead, sir. You have the microphone. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You can sit if you're more comfortable sitting.
No, it's all right.
It's fine? Okay.
I want to thank the government, and in particular the Ministry of Health, for allowing this process. If that is the right channel, yes?
Yes.
It was only this morning, watching Good Morning Barbados, that I learned of this process. And I said, it is funny because I've been waiting now for 47 years for this opportunity. So I got a couple of questions, and then I'll tell you why I've been waiting 47 years. Because there's a solution. We don't have to keep talking about the problem. There is a solution. Now, one question, or the first question. I have a document and 3 books that I would like to present to the commission, and I want to know if that will be all right. Okay. Second question, and this question was posed when I first attended a world conference in Egypt in 1987. And the question is, what role does racism play in psychiatry? So that's the question. Early this year, from the 7th to the 9th of May, the CAPRA had a very big conference here. And I repeated that question. What role does racism play in psychiatry? And tonight, I'm asking the question, what role in Barbados does classism play in psychiatry? And if we look around, we will take note of that the only people here, if I'm right, is black people. So no other ethnic group is concerned, or it would appear, about mental health, especially towards our children. I hope I made the point. But no. This is the background to that. In 1977, I had what we would call an epiphany, a spiritual awakening. Prior to that, I had no interest in world affairs. And the epiphany was backed by a vision and a mission for the 21st century, now. And as I try to share that vision with some people, I would put in the mental institution. Because the vision said that racism will end and black people will become conscious of who we are. So that was madness in England. You get what I mean? And I was on section 25 of the 1959 Mental Health Act. So your act of 1985, your predecessor act was the 1959 British Mental Health Act. I'm sure I'm right. I know this is not up for discussion. And that Mental Health Act was brought in, giving the police, the courts, and the prison the right to pick black people up and send them back to where they were born. And Barbados was playing a key part in that because the biggest mental health facility in the Caribbean was Barbados, Black Rock. Now, I want you to listen carefully and take note of what I'm saying, because as I said, I got a solution. Barbados is the first country in the world that passed a law, the 1661 Slave Code Act, that said that black people were not human beings. If you want me to repeat it, I'll repeat it. The 1661 Slave Code Act was passed in Barbados, which said that black people were not human beings. We were chattels. Every one of us here, our forefathers or grandmothers, live in chattel houses. You all know it. That's the foundation of what mental health is about. So what you're doing now, as Barbados is now preparing to commemorate the 400th anniversary in 2027 of a colony of England. You're now preparing our young children to free their mind from mental slavery. I hope you understand that. What you have coming through me, and I want you to listen to this again. When they put me in the mental institution, I did what was impossible. 28 days section 25, which I'm going to give you the information so you can see and think about it and act upon it. I called, after 3 weeks, it was 28 days, after 3 weeks, I called for a meeting with the chief consultant. And I asked him, what is his prognosis about me? And he told me, and I said, okay, well, let me give you an ultimatum. I am leaving the hospital today at 4 o'clock. And he said, do you know who you're speaking to? I'm not giving you permission. I said, well, that's all right. If you don't give me permission, I'm a Barbadian. I'm going mad. So you all know what a madman does. By 4 o'clock, I would release. The next year, I took Britain to court. My case is still at the point of conclusion after 47 years. And the resources that will be given to me, because we won the case last year, June, but we haven't received the compensation yet. It's just like reparation, what we keep talking about. We know we're entitled to reparation, but they're playing games. The money I will receive is to provide for all of you who have raised these questions. Because in England, because of my experience, the 1959 Mental Health Act was changed to the 1980 Act. So when you changed to 1985, it was because Britain had changed the 1959 to the 1980. And that was done because of me. You will have the information to show you. So what I'm saying is, there is hope. The books I'm going to give you, and the document is called, I ended this so you could appreciate. The document is called Against the Edge. It's a program of action that I have been waiting now. God have helped me to hold on to it for 36 years. And I'm now going to present it to you. I won't give no more information because what has happened to stop me from presenting this to you, to presenting this to the government of Barbados through the Mental Health Act, is classism. Classism is worse in Barbados than racism is in England, because we are fighting in England racism. Our children, as soon as they show any signs of bright, they used to put in internet in schools, what you call it again? Eh? Yes, in school, educational subnormal schools, because they are bright. So the suicide that is taking place here in Barbados now, and I thank the police for highlighting how serious it is and the trouble. I end with this. A month ago, I went to Oyston Police Station and I said to the station sergeant, I would like to have a meeting with you. He took my number, and I haven't heard from him. On Saturday morning, I went to the police station. I said, I come to see the sergeant because this is urgent. I haven't heard from him. But Saturday night, you hear what happened in what we call Oyston? Then 4 people were shot. 1 died. That have now changed the culture in Oyston, because prior to Saturday night, anyone get killed in Oyston was by knife, not gun. So the culture is now changed in Oystein. So I'm saying to you, and I would end, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. All right, we have another question. All right, okay, I'm gonna come back to you. I have David. Yes, you have the microphone.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Quite a bit has been raised here this evening that tells us that there's great scope and scale of work to be done. And so my question really is about vision. I know we're shifting in terms of the composition of the National Mental Health Commission and indeed the work that they're expected to do. And we were told that we're moving more from a position of an advisory nature into a regulatory nature. And I think given, again, some of the questions that were raised here this evening, especially coming down to really the lack of communication that exists or a lack of general public education and awareness, we need to consider what is the vision for what the National Mental Health Commission is going to do. And I guess my question is really about what is your vision as the current National Mental Health Commission about what that commission will do? Will they be the only entity, for example, responsible for the level of intragovernmental communication and dialogue that Dr. Rochester speaks about, the level of public awareness that Fabian would want to see, the level of inclusion of the people from the culture and arts that Cindy spoke to, and certainly the engagement of youth that organizations like Let's Unpack It would be willing or hoping to see. Further to that, and I know we have the minister here, I won't put him on the spot, but just to ask, I know that the current Mental Health Commission does not have funding. And I also know that you have full-time jobs. And the future National Mental Health Commission will also compose individuals who have full-time jobs. Given the scale of the work that we're talking about and the scope of the work that we're talking about, will the future National Mental Health Commission have legs to do the scale of work that we're actually talking about? And so, finally, my question to you, what is the vision for this future Mental Health Commission? Thank you.
I'm going to put the chairman on the spot and leave the vision part for her. But I just want to say that we do have a limited budget. No, we are given a budget as part of the NCD, the overall NCD budget. So it's small, but I expect with everything that is happening that there will be some awareness of our value. And so hopefully our budget will be bigger for the next time. So that's the first thing. So there is, for the first time, there was provision made for us to have some money. The other thing is for a while now we have been advocating to have a mental health coordinator. And I know to my right is a lady here that every meeting we have, she brings it up to make sure that we do not forget about this post. And because you're quite right, all of us have full-time jobs and we have heavy workloads even without doing all of this. So it is sometimes hard to juggle all of it. But the mental health coordinator is a person who will be responsible for doing just that, making sure that there is that intragovernmental collaboration, holding all the pieces and coordinating all the pieces that go together, including working with you guys and bring you in on projects. And so if we can get that post filled, and we are, I think, Minister said, we had to have the post, the job requirements had to be done over and everything. That has been completed. We had a little bit of a hitch with the salary scale, but that has gone back to be corrected. And once that is corrected, I already submitted names of persons who were interested in the post. We will be filling that post because we realize how important it is, especially through these efforts that we have been going through with this, trying to get this legislation out to the public. We realize how important it really would be to have a person who is a point person for all of these things. Planning has been doing a good job and promotion has been doing a good job trying to do these things, but really and truly they're for all of health. So we think it would be good to have our own dedicated person for mental health at that ministerial level as well, who can be that person that goes across all those boundaries. So I think your question is very good, and I'll leave the vision part to the chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. So, you know, our vision is that we would like to see mental health treated in the exact way as physical health conditions. And in fact, we would like to not have that distinction be made. So that when we say health, we immediately think mental as well as physical. Because we are so much in the habit of saying, you know, I have diabetes, I have such and such and such. But when it comes to mental health conditions, we don't talk about these things. So the vision is a broader concept of having all health under the same umbrella, so that the same way you can sit and talk about any type of physical health thing, you can also talk about mental health conditions. So that then there's that stigma that is associated with accessing mental health care will go away. Because everybody now will be talking about, how do I keep well? And in that would be mental wellness as well as physical wellness. You know, so that is really what we want to see. We want to see a functioning commission where, with the mental health coordinator, you have an integration of all these things that we've been talking about here tonight, to the point that Dr. Rochester made earlier about different governmental agencies working seamlessly together so that there are not those gaps that we have all identified. You know, and so that is what we would like to achieve, and we think what we're doing here is just the start of that. I mean, it's very easy for us to be cynical. You know, I remember, you know, coming back to Barbados in 2005 and us talking about we need to rewrite the Mental Health Act. And only now in 2025 do we have something in hand. And even that is just a start, you know. And so it's easy for us to say, oh, we just talk and talk and talk and we never get anything done. But I think we have to, all of us here, because we're here because we're interested and we're committed to this process, I think we have to keep pushing that mental health agenda if it's going to go any further. And I think this is an excellent start to what needs to be done.
All right, I have two questions. Wait, hold on. I have three questions. So let me do this in order. Yeah? Oh, this gentleman, you were waiting a while? Well, okay, well, let me wait for you. So let me get these two questions out the way, and I'm going to come to you. Okay. Who has the mic? Yes, ma'am. No, sir, I come into you. Let him hold the mic, please. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm 14, and I found that a lot of children in schools struggle with their mental health, and rather than speaking to persons, they just keep it to themselves. Some for fear of their information being spread, or fear of not being seen or heard, or fear of being judged. I do know that there are things in place to help those persons, such as guidance counselors in schools and the mental health hotline, but many people don't feel comfortable using those for various reasons, and some don't even know about them. I think most of it has to do with the stigma around mental health. For example, I have a friend who told an adult they wanted to be a psychologist and got shut down being told that they wouldn't make any money and that it just didn't make sense, and that made them give up on their dream. Is there any way to remove the stigma and to make people more comfortable with bringing up their struggles?
Very good question. Thank you for asking. Dr. Rochester?
So thank you for that. So I think conversations like what we're having today, that's part of what's needed to help to break the stigma, but also clearly we need to have more of a public mental health campaign. There needs to be more public education. It needs to be, I suppose you could say, from cradle to the grave. You know, if we could wave a magic wand, we would start by maybe talking to mothers in their maternal clinics and start with perinatal mental health, start talking about what is needed to support children, young infants, toddlers, children. We would have the information in polyclinics. We would have the information in schools. We would do the additional training that we need to do in schools of teachers, of guidance counselors, put in more support people so that we can just normalize mental wellness, because actually that's where we need to start. Obviously, with this kind of legislation, there's a bit of a focus on mental health and what happens when people are at their most vulnerable. But what we also need to be doing is promoting good mental health education, mental wellness, and discussing what normal mental wellness looks like, or what the spectrum of normalcy looks like. It is going to be a lengthy process. Conversations like this, these start things off, people talking to other people, youth talking to youth, like what Let's Unpack It does, conversations on social media, it all helps. But there is more that needs to be done, and it is going to take all of us working together to be able to move things forward in a way that we would like. But education is going to be a key part of the process.
All right, as you notice, we've gone over 8. We're going to get all these questions. I'm going to come to you. I am going to come to you, but I want to get some new questions. Yes, sir, you have the mic.
Hi. Watson World here. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I want to make an observation first, then a recommendation, then a question. My observation is that I was there at the last meeting, and I'm really impressed by the interest and really the presentations and everything, and the sort of momentum that is behind this. I think it's quite refreshing to see all the young people. So I just think that is worthy of praise at this point, the effort that has gone in. So that's my observation. So in terms of my recommendations, it's about some of the language that is used in the app. And I just want to point out 2 things. It's not numbered, but under the right of access to mental health care, it's written, and I think I understand what it's trying to convey, but I don't like how it's written. So let's go. The government shall ensure that mental health services shall be of equal quality to other general health services. And I'm saying no, because some services are substandard. So unless I didn't want to use that word, the S word, but substandard, we use the word substandard for now. And unless we stay with service we're aligning with, it comes across quite negative and as a low pitch, really. So that's, I'll just pause there. You get what I'm trying to say? I think I know what is, so I wanted to just draw that to your attention. The other one is that the health professional right. So right of providers, that's point 12, have the professional qualifications and capacities acknowledged. And I was just wondering, how can the act do that? Because I think I understand again what we are trying to convey here, that maybe the poll in terms of PAHO. So let me just pause there and get some feedback from somebody just to clarify that point first and just,
Right, so bear in mind these are legislative notes, right. And so the legal language would be put in, but to your point, you said you know what we're trying to say. To the first point you made about the mental health care being equal to physical health care, your point is that you think the physical health care is substandard. Our point is it should be at an internationally accepted standard, both things. So that's what we're getting at.
Right. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because when I was thinking, well, hey, there are people complaining every day about certain services in Barbados, E&E and all that sort of thing. So I was just saying, let's clarify that on the go.
Fair enough.
Right. So the other thing yes, I want to get the point on acknowledging of qualifications. What exactly does that mean there?
Right. So sometimes we find ourselves in situations where people are trained and qualified at a certain level, but the job that they're doing does not take that into consideration. And so we're saying if somebody is a counseling psychologist, then they should be recognized as such in terms of payment and that type of thing. Right. And not just, you have a degree and that's the end of it.
Okay, I got you.
I think that because, it is very demoralizing, as you would imagine, for someone to be trained and highly professional and not have that acknowledged.
Yes, I appreciate that, and I think it ties in with something that you said last week in terms of if that you should not be working in the area that you're not qualified to work in.
Right now we have issues where people call themselves different things. hypnosis, I can do hypnosis, I'm a counselor, and, you know, but because you're not registered, nobody has vetted, you know, so like for us, we have our qualifications vetted by the Barbados Medical Council. Other people who are not registered do not go through that process, so they can say, you know, I'm this and that, and offer services, and we're not quite sure if the person is truly qualified. So that's what that is in reference to.
So my question is, will the Mental Health Commission commission services? We talked about the budget a bit, but would you commission services like purchase services from providers for a particular group of, let's say, group in the community or whatever? Would you have that sort of teeth, or going forward, would we be able to recognize that a certain sector of society needs a particular service and actually go as far as, I don't know, even as far as payment?
Right. So we would always work in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And so if there are needs that are identified, like what you're saying, then there would be a pathway to say, you know, we think that these group of people need this particular type of services. So yes, we always, well, our vision is that that's how the Mental Health Commission will function. So it's not just about oversight, but also in recognizing when there's a need and a gap to be filled.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right, next question, coming down this side. This gentleman? Here? Yes. Had his hand up for a bit. Yes. She's going to bring the microphone to you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much. I'm learning a lot tonight, and it's an area I'm looking to get into, so I'm very interested. My question is, you know, hearing about all these systems and all these stakeholders that obviously have a big part to play in what's not working, is there a thought, an overarching policy, like a policy document? It's okay to have a coordinator, but something that gives guidance, that at least gives some indication as how does the police interact with the psychiatrists or the psychotherapists or the younger persons or the persons in culture in that kind of way. That doesn't solve all the problems, but at least maybe it gives a sort of template there that somebody can look and say, okay, this is what we are hoping to do or expecting to get to, even if the resources are not there. Because it does seem that an act is, of course, very good, but the act is the legislative part, but there's also the part of how do we interact, what kind of partnerships, what systems are there, basically, so that a person can come in and then be able to actually get those things going, because we need kind of somebody outside of almost kind of outside of the system to do it. My background is in energy, but it's the same kind of thing, trying to get all these pieces together, and I just wonder, maybe it's already in place, I don't know, but that was just my interest in that. Thanks. But thanks so much.
Thanks for that question. Who's going to take it?
Yeah. So as you said, the law is one thing that tells you where you want to be, but how you get there is what you're referring to. And so yes, those policies would need to be developed, and some of that has already started, but as you can imagine, it's a lot. Somebody mentioned just now that, you know, we all have different jobs that, you know, different. So it started, but there's a lot to be done. But yes, the short answer is yes, because for each sector, there's going to have to be a policy around how do you operate in that area.
All right. Next question. My gentleman here at the back in the hat. Yes, I want to hear what you have to say, sir.
Hi, good evening. I am Charles Jazzy Harper. I've been a barber for 15 plus years, and everyone has a mind. Every one of us needs general education on learning practical ways of deregulation when it comes to our emotional states in our homes and in our institutions of education and learning. Because of the stigma associated with mental health, I am telling you this as a barber who has heard thousands of stories each and every day of my professional life. Individuals would rather share their stories with a person like me than to come to a clinically trained individual to express the things that are going on in their mind. However, when we sit and hear the qualifications required to enter the groups that are responsible for helping us with our mental health, and then an individual like me is not given entry into the door because my qualification is not accredited, then the value that I can bring to helping individuals manage their mental and emotional well-being due to my own personal development, due to the fact that I've heard thousands of stories, literally thousands of stories over the last couple of years, and due to my studying of other non-traditional ways of learning, you know, why is it that individuals like me are not seen as go-to solutions to helping individuals who are experiencing their mental and emotional challenges? I'll share with you this. I saw a client die in my barbershop 5 weeks and 6 days after my father passed away at the QH hospital, right? The individual literally took 4 steps from where he was sitting, sat in my barber chair, and within moments, his life ended. Everyone thought about how are we going to help his son, who witnessed what he went through, deal with the challenge that he saw. Nobody thought to reach out to any of my barbershop customers to see, yeah, though, how are you handling the fact that you just witnessed your fellow barbershop customer leave physical life? If those other 5 men did not have an individual like me to be able to share what they're going through and be able to share their new perspectives on how to process what they were experiencing, who knows where they would have gone down. One of my best friends went missing a couple of years back. And at this point, it was not training with the tools that I currently have, which is something called the lifting method, which focuses on how we use our internal and external dialogue, and how our internal and external dialogue shapes the experiences that we go through. Our mental and emotional well-being is definitely driven by the language that we use to ourselves, about ourselves, and the language that we use to express to others the challenges that we are going through. If you're consistently saying that I'm always X, Y, or Z, and you're painting that picture of 100% of the time, this is always the case, then your emotional intensity is going to be 10 over 10 every time you think about that. But what if you just simply change that always to sometimes, and all of a sudden you get to reduce your emotional intensity from a 10 to a 7. Simple solutions like that helps individuals to deregulate and to change their perspective about worst case scenarios to being able to handle the challenges that they're going through. About my friend Troy that passed. Troy went missing, and Troy, because he was not qualified at that point, he didn't even feel comfortable enough to share with me, one of his best friends, the challenges that he was going through. Do you think that Troy would have decided to take up the phone and call a professional to help? Nah, though. Troy was not at that point. He was not feeling comfortable enough to even talk to somebody. We have to do more about empowering individuals to see that their mental body and their mind is not something that has to be diagnosed in order for them to get help with. We do not need accreditation to create our mental challenges at all. When we replay the same negative loops consistently each and every day, we didn't need a degree to do that. We didn't need someone qualified to say, yes or no, you have a problem. No, it's the fact that I'm telling myself the same negative story each and every day and not finding ways to see new perspectives and not even knowing that I can actually just have a conversation and change the way I think. That can help me to go from a 10 over 10 emotional intensity back down to a 7, and then maybe figuring out what are the next steps I can take to even go from a 7 to a 5 and then take positive action. I had 2 clients in my barbershop who experienced one of them was a student of the law school the individual who was killed at the football earlier this year. One of his classmates is one of my barbershop clients, and I shared with him the process that I use to help him to externalize the thoughts that he was having. And I could visibly see my little friend go from can't even tell his dad what is going on in his mind to now looking at the words that is going on in his mind and being able to change some of them to feel better about himself. He didn't need to go to, that process took less than 15 minutes, and he was able to get to a better place about what he was currently experiencing. All I'm saying is it's time to empower individuals outside of the accredited sources with the power to help. It's time to empower individuals like me with, point people my direction sometimes, so that we don't go to only see mental wellness as something that needs to be treated, as opposed to something that we can all get better at by learning the skills of deregulation, at least that, learning to control the way we breathe, so that we can get to calm states, so that our decision making is not impaired because we are constantly feeling stress. Here's another important thing too. We normalize too often the idea that, and I don't want to go on for forever, so you ain't going to roll eyes, but we normalize the idea of feeling terror, stress, and overwhelmed as if that's a badge of honor. So we figure if we can have who has the most stress conversation, and we can brag about how hard we work, and we can brag about how tired we are, and we can have the same complaints in our small groups and the WhatsApp groups, and we can then go to TikTok and Instagram to laugh it off, and then tomorrow we got the same negative loops replaying in our thoughts. We normalize stress as if it's a badge of honor. That's weird to me. It is weird to me to not think that being well and feeling calm and having high levels of clarity should be your normal. Just as weird as it for me, it is weird for me to see people not think that getting help and being vulnerable is a sign of I am strong and I'm actually looking to solve my challenges, as opposed to the current stigma that is associated with mental health, where it seems as if I get a label, something is wrong with me. The last thing we want to have is many people walking around with labels that make them to feel less than, labels that disempower them, and then all they do in their professional lives, from however high the affluence is or however low, to think that being stressed is a normal, because there are solutions to this, and they don't have to always be clinical. I've tried to join some of the groups locally and not even find the key to the door, because when they check the prerequisites to join, Jazzy went to a degree to get this knowledge and this experience. I've just had 15,000 conversations with 15,000 human beings expressing 15,000 stories of stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. And just helping them to shift perspective about what they're experiencing reduces their emotional intensity from 10s to 7s, and sometimes even all down to 4. I didn't need a degree for that or accreditation for that. And if we could help other people to see that there are solutions outside of going to the mental or going to a clinically trained individual, I think we can do more for a general society. The young lady over there that spoke about the school children experiencing challenges, 15 years down that road, right down there, 15 years interacting with this institution and some of the other schools that to get to and from school, they come to my general area. I can visibly see that even at our young ages, we have young people whose go-to solutions is to go from 0 to 10,000, even to say, excuse me. So when we practice behavioral patterns that normalize feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and then our children see how we solve our challenges, which is to sweep it under the carpet, or find ways to get distracted, then how are we empowering even them to see that there are ways to be better and ways to be different? If the examples the adults are setting is we can find an adult way to just escape whatever behavior you decide to go down the road. I just want to normalize solutions of help outside of the clinical road, please.
All right. Thank you so much. No, this is going to be the absolute last. It has to be quick because we're at 8:28 and we're wrapping up at 8:30, and they still have an audience prize to give away. So one real quick question.
Thank you very much. Yes. Good night. Very quickly. This question is to the minister. Mr. Minister, good night. Yeah, good night to you, sir. My question is, what about if we actually utilize the telemedicine aspect? Because I know you were the former minister, and thank you very much for your service. You Minister of Innovation, Science, and Technology in terms of leveling up the current mental health human resource. Well, there are not many humans available, so what you can do is that you can actually use some of the retired, and I would have seen a couple of them, retired psychiatrists and psychologists to come back to do telemedicine in their aspect where they could actually come and help people like me to, on their follow-up journey who want to be seen and, right, it was supposed to be quick, so.
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of the aspect of utilizing as well the facility for the Harrison's Point, I believe that some of that facility should be used for mental health as well, so that you can actually get, along with utilizing telemedicine and utilizing increasing the human resource aspect, so that you could get more psychologists, more psychiatrists, more people to come in the way that they can, because you're utilizing telemedicine and the aspects of AI and so on to make people, what we spoke about on brass stats, like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and that will have to be our final question. Unfortunately, to those who are on YouTube, I'm sorry I didn't get to all of your questions. We have at least another 8 or 9 questions, but if you can, send your comments, questions, or suggestions to mhlinfo@health.gov.bb. Yes, Minister.
Yes, good night to one and to all. I'm going to be even quicker than you in my response, because your question is a very good question. I believe strongly in the integration of technology into all aspects of health delivery, mental health, physical health, emotional health, and all of the other dimensions of health that we have. So I am fully behind and supportive of the use of telemedicine, and being able to utilize that as one of the ways that we deliver in a more efficient way than we are right now, trying to expand our human resources. One aspect of it that we have actually started to tackle within the Ministry of Health and Wellness relates to speech therapy. When I came into the ministry, one of the biggest backlogs that I found was a 400-strong waiting list for being able to access speech therapy services within the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Unfortunately, that's because of a lack of human resources. And it is one that we cannot easily overcome by trying to add more human resources. So one of the things I would have asked the team is to see how they can investigate utilizing persons from overseas, therapists who are overseas, therapists even within the private sphere here in Barbados, to see those who may be able to dedicate an hour or so sessionally during the course of the week and just give back almost. And even if you have to pay them, that's not a problem. But being able to just expand the reach of therapists who are available not only in Barbados but across the world, who would be able to sit with clients. Every single case is not one that can be done through telemedicine. One that there's not every single situation that can be dealt with in that way, but those cases that can be dealt with through technology, telemedicine, and other fields, we would want to see how we can embrace that technology. So it is something that we are seeking to do, and I thank you for raising it, because I think it's a worthwhile area of endeavor for us to explore. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Minister. Before we go, we have one question. Because we have an audience prize to give away. So the first person who answers the question correctly, what is the main purpose of the new Mental Health Act? What is the main purpose of the new Mental Health Act? Yes, sir.
The main purpose of the new Mental Health Act is to level up the mental health community in Barbados by facilitating and innovating the outdated, going back to the minister's answer, the human resources aspect, where you want to utilize technology more to really involve and innovate and level up and give the rehabilitative mental and physical therapy to really make mental and physical health coalesce them, streamline them, make them more what you would call regulated, make them more excellent, so that you're able to involve the aspect of really becoming a 21st century republic and making the government a teacher of righteousness and a teacher of rights and of freedoms, so that you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Janelle, you're going to make the presentation. Who's going to make the presentation? Here we have our representative from Let's Unpack It. Thank you so much for participating. You asked, he started the conversation, he ended the conversation, and he's been at both conversations. We thank you so much for your interest and support. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank each and every one of you who have come here to the Princess Margaret Secondary School and who've joined us on YouTube. The Honorable Davison Ishmael, Minister of State in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Let me just get my correct. Dr. Arthur Phillips, Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Tarlene Malcolm, who's the acting PAHO WHO representative, Dr. Maisha Emmanuel, who's the Chairman, National Mental Health Commission, and Dr. Sue, who is the Deputy Chair, Dr. Joy Sue, of course, Dr. Rochester, Dr. McClacken, other members of the National Mental Health Commission, senior officers of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and other specially invited guests, you who took the time to come and sit with us and talk to us, and those of you, again, as I said, who joined us online, and of course, members of the media who are following online. We thank you so much. Thank you for coming to St. Philip. I know some of you live far, and you know you want to leave because it's a long trek. So we thank you, and we wish you a safe journey home and a happy crop over. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.